You're listening to the OCD Stories podcast, hosted by me, Stuart Ralph. The OCD Stories is a podcast dedicated to raising awareness and understanding around obsessive-compulsive symptoms. I do this through interviewing inspired therapists, psychologists, and people who have experienced OCD. Welcome to the OCD Stories. And welcome to episode 456 of the podcast. And in this one, I got on Dr. Marisa Mazza. Marisa is a licensed clinical psychologist and founder of Choice Therapy Psychological Services. And in this episode, we discuss her book, What is Shame? How Shame Manifests in OCD, how shame can interfere with exposure and response prevention therapy, the inner critic, self-compassion, loving kindness, why we all deserve self-compassion, how to integrate self-compassion into ERP, fears, blocks and resistances to self-compassion, and much more. And thank you to NoCD for supporting the podcast. NoCD offers effective and convenient therapy available in the US and outside the US. To find out more about NoCD, their therapy plans, if they currently take your insurance, or to download their free app, head to go.treatmyocd.com/the OCD stories, or the link will be in the episode description. Thank you to all of our patrons for supporting our work. To sign up to our Patreon and to check out the other benefits you'll receive as a patron, please see the link in the show notes. So thank you to you guys, as always, for listening. I deeply appreciate it. And thank you to Marisa for her time and expertise. I also deeply appreciate that. And we all deserve self-compassion. I really hope this episode helps you on that journey to being kinder to yourself. So without further ado, here is Marisa. Welcome to the podcast, Marisa.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. So, as you know, I like to hear therapist stories. So, why they became a therapist and then ultimately why OCD.
For sure. So, the truth be told, in high school, the only class I liked going to was psychology. And so I always felt drawn to trying to understand the mind, understand emotions. And looking back on it, I think a lot of it is because I've struggled with my own anxiety. I've witnessed a lot of my family members struggling with things like depression, anxiety, OCD. And so I've always had this curiosity of trying to understand, what leads to people suffering. And throughout my studies, I continued to want to go to psychology classes and want to learn more. And when I got the opportunity to start working with clients, I always felt that the interactions were reciprocal, really. It was like I was helping them connect with themselves into certain tools, but I also learned so much from my clients as well, and they inspire me all the time. And so I feel like I became a therapist kind of selfishly, really, to understand myself and what was happening with my family and trying to grow and learn. And I feel very blessed and appreciative that I get to do the work that I do, and then I get to learn from the clients that I learn from, and I get to share the information that I've been privileged to have.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, no, that's awesome, and I agree. You learn so much from your clients, right? They teach you so much. Sometimes they say things I'm like, but that's incredibly wise. Like, I've never thought of that. Like, it's amazing. Like, you pick so much up from them. Yeah, I guess, just to plug your book for a second. So you've written a book on ACT. Yeah, is that?
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about that.
I wrote the ACT workbook for OCD. And once I was kind of finishing up grad school, I was sort of thinking about what do I want to do? What do I want to specialize? What do I want to focus on? And I've always been drawn to evidence-based therapies. I've always been drawn to understanding anxiety and how to work with anxiety, as I mentioned, because of some of my own struggles. And so I really honed in on learning as much as I could about how to work with anxiety. And so that meant doing a lot of training in ERP, that meant doing a lot of training in ACT. And I find that they're both really valuable tools. And I really wanted to know how to use them together. I didn't see it as an either or. And about the time that I was starting our IOP, I was looking for resources on like, how do I integrate these two models? And there really wasn't much out there. And it wasn't until my mentor said, well, you're doing this stuff in your IOP, you've created this model. Like, I think you need to create the book you're looking for. And it was really through her encouragement and mentorship that I reached out to New Harbinger, and they were like, yes, we've been looking for something like this. And it's been a very challenging, writing is not my strength. And it was a very challenging time around the time that I also was pregnant and giving birth to my kiddo at the same time. And so I say I was giving birth to two things, the book and my kiddo. And I've received a lot of positive feedback from folks all around the world, just saying how much it's really impacted them. And so it really warms my heart that it's been able to help folks, especially those that maybe can't access evidence-based therapies.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you're getting that response. And so I guess you've kind of seen the book flourish as did you say your son?
Yes. Yeah.
As your son's grown.
Yeah.
Nice. So today we're going to talk about shame within OCD, and then self-compassion as one idea for dealing with shame. So I guess I firstly wanted to just get your take on what is shame. How would you sort of define it?
Yeah, so I define shame as I am bad. I am bad, right? Like I am deeply, deeply bad. Whereas I see guilt as maybe I've done something wrong. But shame just feels so much bigger, so much heavier. It's like at the core, I feel like I'm this bad, horrible person.
Yeah, I guess as you say that, like for me, shame is almost like when guilt takes hold, when guilt cements. I don't know, that's just what popped up in my head. Like guilt can feel quite temporary. I've done something bad, I've messed up. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you hold on to that guilt long enough, it's I am bad.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's useful. I know obviously I am bad. This is a key theme within OCD with all the different thoughts people get. They can often feel that way. So I'll probably ask you about self-compassion in a bit, but how does shame manifest within OCD? Like what do you notice with your clients?
Yeah, so I became interested in understanding shame and working with self-compassion because I did notice that among some of the folks that were coming into my practice, like it wasn't just that OCD was the problem, it was also that they had this like really loud critic. And for some people, it was linked to their perfectionism, like constantly saying, well, I should be bigger, better, more different in some way. And other times it was more so just related to sort of the stigma of having a mental health disorder, the stigma of experiencing certain obsessions like harm and pedophilia obsessions. And I started to notice a theme of folks like coming to us because we work with ACT and ERP, saying things like, oh, I failed out of ERP, maybe I'll try this ACT thing. But really, I don't think it was ERP's fault. I actually think that they were so consumed by self-criticism and rumination and that shame that that was the compulsion, if you will. And it actually got in the way of their willingness to even do exposures, of even do the work. And so for some of those folks, I actually would start with working with the shame and the self-criticism. And from there, we were able to then get into actually active exposure practices.
Okay, wow. So yeah, so if the shame is almost making me feel I don't deserve to do this work, I don't deserve to get better, then obviously ERP is going to be completely ineffective because I don't deserve it. So why would I put the effort in? Why would I believe it's going to work?
Exactly. And I had, one example is I had one gentleman with quite severe OCD and depression. And a big part of the depression was shame related. And that he's like, I know my compulsions don't work, but yet I continue to do them over and over and over again. And they've had a negative impact on my life and on my family. And I am a horrible person for continuing to engage in my compulsions. And so that was where we started, really, was with how, he was treating himself for having a disorder in which so much of it is completely out of your control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, he was punishing himself for having it when it was not his choice to have it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, wow. There are other ways you see sort of shame manifesting within your clients.
Yeah, so I think it comes up a lot with perfectionism, right? Constantly setting the bar so high for oneself, I think leads to this constant failing of most of the times the expectations that are set are not realistic. And as a result, they feel as though like they're not able to keep up. And I say they, but I'm also having an internal struggle because I also struggle with some perfectionism. And so I'll switch it to I. I know I for myself, I'm constantly, my mind is really good at telling me how often I'm failing. And so I do find that often that is a thought with folks with perfectionism is I'm failing, I'm not good enough, right? I'm not capable. And I feel like engaging in some of that self-compassion work around the shame associated with genuinely believing that you should be meeting your standards and there's something wrong with you for not meeting those standards can be immensely powerful. I find, the combination of ACT and ERP plus that self-compassion piece of knowing that one, building the awareness around the mind and our relationships to it and what's helpful and what's not, but then also the acceptance piece around it's not a matter of if you will fail, you will fail. We all fail. It's a normal part of being a human being. It's a normal part, right? So, where did this come from? Where did you learn that you shouldn't fail? And is that serving you? Is it serving you to get, closer to your values and the things that are important to you? And where self-compassion is being able to treat yourself with loving kindness when you do fail, knowing that you're not alone in your suffering.
Yeah, perfect. And perfect. There you go. No such thing as a perfect answer. It was a very good answer. Yeah, and that kind of, along with the self-compassion, it's that you're human and humans make mistakes, and that's okay. You're not a robot. And even robots break eventually, so they're not perfect.
Yes. Yes. And I think another common experience of folks with shame is I'm not worthy or deserving of kindness. And that's something that I think is so important and can also impede OCD treatment as well. Right. If I'm not worthy of love and kindness, maybe I'm not worthy of improving and living a better life. Sometimes I'll ask my clients that are really stuck and not engaging in treatment, like, what would getting better mean for you in your life? Right. And sometimes in that process, that thought of like, well, I'm not really worthy of living a full life. Right. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of kindness. And so I think, again, like mindful self-compassion can really help with one, being aware of it, two, practicing new ways of interacting with yourself that's in a more loving, kind way. And three, third component of compassion is again knowing that you're not alone in it, that we as human beings all suffer. Everyone's got a different flavor. For some people it's OCD, for some people it's alcohol, for some people it's spending. Most of us have some kind of flavor of something, and that recognition of like we're not alone in that, I think, can be immensely helpful, because having OCD and feeling completely alone in it is very different than having OCD and feeling connected and like you have a community and people that get you.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why, the online OCD community is such a powerful thing. And I've spoken to so many people who are sort of mental health advocates, but not OCD advocates. And they've dipped their toe in the water of the OCD community, and they've been really shocked at how supportive it is compared to other diagnostic communities. And I think that's a real testament to people with OCD, and just shows you the importance of having that tribe. Or even if it's not, even if you're not part of the community, because statistically probably most people aren't, it's finding people that can kind of see you in that pain and validate it. It's okay. And I'm going through something too. And that common humanity, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I have an adult online support group that I've been running maybe 4 or 5 years now. And we do get new members, but the base, the people that have been around, they've really been around for the 4 to 5 years. And the common theme that I hear is, you are my people. Like, you are my people. You get me. And for some folks, they are alone in it. Like, their family members don't really get them. Their friends don't really get them. And so finding those folks that do get you, I think can really make a difference.
Yeah, I agree. I think as humans, we want to be seen, like in a big way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Seen, heard, and loved. Right? We all want that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when we don't have that, it can be so isolating and painful.
Yeah, well, we see like how harmful loneliness can be to health.
Yes.
The evidence is there. And it just shows you we're meant for connection. And when that's not there, it's catastrophic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So before we go on to self-compassion in more detail, I just wanted to ask you a very general question around shame. So anyone listening who is experiencing shame and can resonate to what you're saying, maybe it's because they've got taboo intrusive thoughts, or shame around the amount of compulsions they do, or shame around what OCD's taken from them, or whatever it is. Maybe just generally shame that has nothing to do with OCD. It's something else in their life. So why don't they need? Why shouldn't they feel shame? Or why don't they need to feel it? I guess is what I'm asking.
I guess I would say, if there's shame there, it's not something that maybe we can initially just make go away, right? There's a saying in ACT, if you don't want it, you got it, it's there. If you are experiencing shame, right, there's typically some kind of thought pattern going on around like, I'm bad, I'm a failure, I'm not good enough, I'm unworthy. And we all learn how to treat ourselves, how to interact with ourselves through our upbringing, through different experiences we've had in our childhood, through how our parents spoke to us, to how our parents spoke to themselves. And so these are things that, like, again, are very much out of our control, and yet we have them internalized like a tape playing. And again, the more we buy into those thoughts and the more we focus on that thought, those kinds of thoughts, the more likely it is we will experience shame. And if that is the case, then I would say it's okay to like lean into the feelings in the body, right? Every feeling is linked to a physical sensation, and it's okay to acknowledge like what that shame feels like in the body. And notice what's happening with the mind, right? Because if you're continuing to ruminate and buy into and believe those thoughts, it will just continue that cycle, right? So also learning how to work with the mind and creating a new type of script and learning how to treat yourself with the loving kindness you deserve is also really important. And the why is because we are all deserving of that love and kindness, even when the mind says otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I guess before we get into the treatment side of it, for you personally, how do you intertwine loving kindness or self-compassion into your own personal life? Is it daily? Is it weekly, monthly? Yeah.
Yeah, good question. So, I initially started with going to trainings and retreats, and some of them silent retreats through the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion. And so I've learned a lot through doctors Chris Germer and Kristen Neff through their model of mindful self-compassion. And I more recently just did a training with Paul Gilbert around compassion focused therapy. And so for me personally, it's looked like showing up to different trainings and different classes, going on retreats, and it also includes my lifestyle. So I talk to my clients often about, and I try and practice what I preach around, like how do we create a lifestyle to take care of your mind, your body, your nervous system, and so I do try to meditate daily. And that includes the practice of mindful self-compassion. And I actually go to my own mindful self-compassion group that meets because I do feel like having a community that have that shared value and shared connection helps you in your one-on-one practice. And as a parent, I'm sure, as you know, I don't always have the luxury of doing my 20 to 30 minute, self-compassion practices that I would love to be doing. And so I've also, learned some tips and tricks of like, how do you just do it in the moment? And sometimes it's just throughout my day, putting my hand on my heart or, selfishly, I start off a lot of my therapy sessions with a 1 to 2 minute grounding slash self-compassion exercise. Not only does it help my clients, it also helps me be a better therapist. And at the end of the day, what I notice is I feel less burnt out when I'm, dipping into compassion and presence throughout my day. And so I try to weave it in little ways by doing groups, daily meditation, even practicing with my clients.
Yeah, nice. And have you found over the years that you can respond to your mind much quicker in the moment when it does go to maybe that inner critic or is being harsher on you or something like that?
Yes, I find that I'm more aware of my critic. I find that I now have the tools to know what to do when I'm experiencing shame and guilt. And I've been pleasantly surprised at times where I've actually started to hear like a kind and compassionate voice automatically coming up now, which, they talk about is like with practice and over time, you start to build that muscle and you do start to notice that automatic kind response, which is very different from when I first started practicing.
Yeah. That's really good to hear. I don't think I'm quite there yet. I'm still responding to the inner critic, but it's good because I'm catching it quicker and responding, and that's making a difference to my life and well-being. So yeah, maybe that's nice to know that that's the next stage of evolution for me is the automatic. Nice comments.
May I say one thing about what you just said? Because I think this is really important is that when you think about the critic, right? sort of think about, I'll often do an experiential exercise with clients around this, around, think about your critic and think about their voice and how they sound when they're speaking to you, and sort of reflect on like how they're actually feeling and what perhaps they're trying to remind you of that's important to you. Oftentimes, our critics are trying to remind us of our values, of things that are genuinely important to us, and they're feeling scared. Right. And so, kind of acknowledging that the critic too needs, actually, I think it's most important for the critic to get loving compassion as well. And so, one of the ways that we can do that is by saying, like, I see you, critic, or like, I hear you saying I need to be bigger, better, more different in some way. And thank you for reminding me of my values of, wanting to live fully or richly or whatever it is. And your way's not working for me.
Yeah.
Right? Like setting that boundary where like your way is not working for me. I'm going to try this in a more loving, kind, good enough way.
Yeah. I really like that twist. And I think, I think the inner critic from an evolutionary point of view is something that is very helpful, or was probably more helpful once upon a time when the world was much riskier than it is now. Obviously, for some people, it is very risky still, but generally speaking, it's much better than it was 10,000 years ago. And the inner critic would have been way more important to keep us alive than it is so now. It is serving a purpose. It's trying to help in the same way I think OCD is trying to help. It's just, as you said, it's not serving me now, but as you're saying, acknowledging its intentions and how it's feeling. Yeah, I like that.
And it may serve us in some ways, even now, like reminding us of our values of kindness, of to be a nice, kind person to others. I feel like, I think most people are actually kinder to others than they are themselves. And in some ways that may also be the critic reminding us of things.
Yeah, you're right. We need the critic in that if we, tell someone to F off for no apparent reason, we need that critic to go, hang on a minute, was that fair? Was that, But
in certain contexts.
It's more when you make like an innocent mistake and then the inner critic's just beating you up over it, and then it's like, okay. I like that. It's a good way to look at it. Within ERP or ACT, how are you sort of bringing in compassion? You've talked about it a bit already, but I just want to ask it more explicitly. What ways are you sort of intertwining self-compassion into those more evidence-based gold standard treatments for OCD?
Sure. So, the way I see it in the ACT model is it is very much in line with acceptance. It falls under acceptance. So mindfulness might say something like, oh, I see you shame, or I see you guilt, right? Whereas self-compassion actually teaches you how to be with painful experiences. And so from an ACT perspective, I see it as very much a part of acceptance, a willingness to have our experiences. And in fact, when I practice mindful self-compassion, oftentimes people feel more, not less. Right. And that kind of brings me into like ERP and just in the same manner that I use scripts. I often use scripts for folks when I'm doing exposures. I actually do add in a self-compassion script into my exposures as well. And so not only is it about, diffusing from the thoughts and identifying the core fear and connecting with the feelings in the body, but it's also for recognizing that it's okay to feel these feelings and that everyone has big, difficult feelings sometimes. And that setting that intention around, and how do you want to show up? how do you want to be towards yourself when your OCD is really loud? Or how do you want to be with yourself when you're noticing that shame, right? What's in line with your values and what sort of an intention do you want to set? Yeah. So one way I do it is by incorporating scripts through exposures. And then sometimes I'll also practice meditations and journaling exercises with clients.
Yeah. Wow. Do you do sort of loving kindness meditations with clients?
I do. I do. Yeah. So sometimes I really love the way Kristen Neff does them. So sometimes we'll just listen to one of Dr. Kristen Neff's loving kindness meditations in session, or sometimes I'll lead them through my own. That might be a little bit of a blend of an exposure plus self-compassion. Yeah.
Nice, I
Yeah.
like that. I like that. And self-compassion, I think, well, in compassion-focused therapy, they talk about fears, blocks, and resistances, if I've got it in the right order, FBRs. So what sort of fears, blocks, or resistances do you notice in your clients around compassion?
Good question. So I noticed this with myself as well as with my clients when I first started practicing, and often when clients first start practicing, is this thought of it's selfish, right? Like I shouldn't take care of me. I shouldn't do me. It is selfish. I need to be focused on others. And I think that's a really interesting thought. And one of the things I learned through my own training was that what the research actually shows is that folks that practice self-compassion are actually have more capacity for helping others, not less. So what I noticed in my own life is that when I practice self-compassion, I'm so much less irritable and angry and anxious. Like I'm actually better able to be the kind mom and partner that I want to be towards my husband and my kiddo. Um, so for me, that was a little bit of a shift, is like you're not just practicing self-compassion for you. The effects of it will also trickle out into your families and into your jobs. And there's also, you can think of it from like a neurological perspective as well, in that we have mirror neurons. And so when I'm anxious and overwhelmed, right? Like my brain is sending those signals off, and my kiddos' mirror neurons picks up on that and says, you're anxious too now, right? But when I'm more grounded and peaceful and, oxytocin is flowing, which is what happens when we practice mindful self-compassion, his mirror neurons also picks up on that, and he's more grounded and peaceful.
Yeah, that's a good point. I see that with my kid. If I'm stressed or my wife's stressed, she can get snappy very quickly. And she's just picking up on that. Yeah. So, I like that. So is there anything else you want to say on self-compassion, either generally or for OCD?
I want to say the only other thing that I would say is, for some people, they view self-compassion as like this like soft kind of frou-frou thing, and using language like, may I be kind to myself, may I be loving, may I be peaceful. Like for some people, that's just like too much of a big pill to swallow, like too big of a pill to swallow. It just feels so excruciating, like uncomfortable. And so what I would say is, if you do end up checking out any of these meditations or looking into mindful self-compassion and the language isn't working for you, use whatever language does. I had a client, and we were talking about like how she can respond to some of the obsessions that she experiences. And we would try to practice just acknowledging it in kind of a loving way. And it was not working for her. She's like, this is not like, no.
Yeah.
She was a marathon runner though. And I was like, well, let me ask you a question. Like when you're running a marathon, like what kinds of thoughts do you have then? And she's like, well, sometimes my mind's giving me thoughts like you got this, and other times it's giving me thoughts like you can't do this, it's too hard, it's too overwhelming. And I'm like, well, how do you respond to the it's too hard, it's too overwhelming type thoughts? And she says, well, I say, shut the fuck up. um And I'm like, does that work? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, great. Then let's say that. Great. And so it's really about finding the words and the language for you that, helps you identify this part of yourself, recognize it, and create a little bit of a barrier towards continuing to feed into it. And language is important, and the types of words that work for you may be different. And so you can play around with, what actually works for you.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I think definitely compassion can feel a bit soft and woo-woo for some people. Of course it's not, but that's how it can come across. So yeah, I like that, adjusting the wording and eventually they might get to that place of loving kindness wording, but it's too much of a big step right now. So yeah, I like the adjusting idea.
Yeah, and self-compassion can also be very bold and courageous and big, right? And so sometimes by giving ourselves loving kindness, no matter what it looks like, because sometimes we need that tough love type of approach. It at the end of the day, it's aimed at helping you show up in the way that's most important to you.
Yeah, I like that. Nice. So, slight change. You got a billboard? What do you want written on the billboard?
I love you.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. And you can pick up the phone and call the 18-year-old you. What'd you tell her?
I would say, I see you. I love you. And I'm with you.
Nice. So just compassionate support.
Yeah. Kind of goes back to what you said in the beginning. Like, we just all want to be seen, heard, and loved, right?
Yeah.
And I think being able to provide that for ourselves is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. So many times I hear it, with my clients, and they will just say something like they just weren't seen. Something wasn't acknowledged, or when it was brought up, it wasn't given the respect it needed, and the pain is caused from that not being seen, like ripples through years until it is eventually dealt with. Yeah. So, lastly, anything else you wish you could have said or shared today?
I think just based off of what you just said, I think one of my critiques sometimes of some of these gold standard treatments is that we do miss seeing our clients sometimes. Like, I feel like the micro skill of like actually seeing them and working with them and truly being with them where they're at and recognizing their pain is a really, really important skill that I think is sometimes forgotten about or lost in some of these treatments.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. Yeah. I don't know why the whole square peg round hole is coming to mind of just sometimes shoving our clients through this evidence-based hole. Instead of maybe the evidence-based hole needs to adjust slightly for the shape of the client. Yeah. Okay. So look, thank you so much for coming on, talking about compassion, shame. Hopefully, if anyone has shame, or feels ashamed, this episode has helped them.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. And thank you to our Patreons who helped make this episode possible. And if you would like to find out more about Patreon and the rewards and benefits, then there will be a link in the episode description. If you enjoy the OCD Stories podcast and would like to support us, please subscribe and rate the show wherever you listen to the podcast. And thank you to NoCD for supporting our work. If you want to find out more about NoCD, head to go.treatmyocd.com/the OCD Stories or click the link in the episode description. And quick disclaimer, guys, this podcast is not therapy. It is not a replacement for therapy. Please seek treatment from a trained professional. And until we speak, take care.